Hi, ladies. This is Nicole Elissa, transformational love coach, and today I am with my friend and coach Valerie Greene. Valerie is incredibly passionate about really helping women attract and keep lasting love. Welcome, Valerie.
Hello, Nicole. I'm so happy to be here. And of course, this is a topic I can talk about forever.
Yes. So, ladies, today we are talking about honestly and how to create intimacy with a man, right? The number one way to do it. And Valerie and I were talking about this earlier, and we're really passionate to talk about it. So, I would first like to start asking Valerie, what is it that you feel is like the number one way to create intimacy with a man?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I feel like a lot of women are running around in doing mode. I know even I am with my business here in New York City. And when we try to approach a man from this mind space where we're thinking and planning and doing and telling him what we want from that masculine place, then that is like two masculine energy people butting heads. So the number one way to create intimacy with a man, I find, is to go from our head and drop down into our heart. And I know we have a lot of people telling us to do that, like, oh yes, just follow your heart. But how do we actually do that?
Right. The big question.
That's what I want to communicate in this video, because I like to teach practical tools in order to do that. Would you agree that that's kind of the number one shift to make?
Yeah, for sure. Because I personally believe that what makes a woman communicate from her headspace in many ways is the fact that she's not feeling safe, that she needs to be somebody else.
Yeah.
And the culture might even tell you, like, you need to be like a man. Like, I think there's this movie that tells you, like, how to think like a man or communicate like a man. And if you want to get something from a man, you need to communicate like a man. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you have to understand how men think and how they communicate in order to not misinterpret him. Because I think that's one of the mistakes that I see women making when they're trying to create intimacy with a man, is they think that men think and communicate like we do. And so if he's, like if you're sharing your feelings and he tries to jump in and fix it, which is kind of the cliche, you think that he doesn't care about your feelings and he's just trying to, solve the problem, and that's not what you want. But you have to recognize that that's men's default mode. And that's not going to create intimacy, even if you are in your heart sharing your feelings and you don't set him up properly, that what you want is for him to listen. And then he starts, solving the problem, and you're like, you're judging me, or, stop trying to fix it. You always do that. Like, that's going to push intimacy away. So I think it is important to understand how men think and communicate, but we shouldn't try to communicate like them. I think that, like, when a feminine woman, and I don't assume every woman is naturally feminine, but I find most of us are, and quickly defining masculine energy is like thinking, planning, and doing, trying to make things happen, solving the problems, analyzing. And feminine energy is just being, feeling and sharing our feelings, collaborating instead of trying to lead, like really having this light, playful energy, and all of the fullness of our emotional expression, right? It's not just lightness and play, but, sensuality, intuition, all of those things, creativity, all of those things are feminine. And although I think a lot of teachers are talking about how to be in your feminine, but I find that it's important when you want to create intimacy with a man, it requires those three things that we talked about. It's like being in your feminine, also being in your heart, because you could be in your feminine and just like be emotive in an angry way, and that's not going to create intimacy unless you're with a very emotionally mature, present man who's like, bring it on, which is possible, but not that's not where most men are at. And then the third thing is like really understanding like the context in which you have to express yourself in order for a man to actually get you and drop into that intimacy space with you.
Yeah, that's powerful. So I love how you broke it down. I tend to be very flowy, like whenever like I'm communicating, and uh, one thing that really caught my attention that I think would add a lot of value here is when you said how when you tell a man like stop trying to like solve it and everything and like get angry at him for solving it, that there should be a different way. And I would love
Mm-hmm.
to address that first because there's a lot of talk right now telling men that they need to like be more connected with their feminine and all these things. Like there's something wrong with a man wanting to solve things. And I personally don't believe that there's anything wrong with,
Yeah, I agree.
right?
Sometimes that's what we want. We want the man to jump in and solve things.
Yeah. So I find that when we go into that space of making the man wrong, it's a losing game.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the main components about being in our heart, is like, and I'm making a whole separate video about what I call the 5 components of being in your heart. And one of them is this sense of acceptance, which is very misinterpreted. It doesn't mean you just let the guy walk all over you. It doesn't mean that you just accept whatever's happening and go along with it if you don't want to. But what it means is that you're not making him wrong. You're not making the moment wrong. You know, obviously, if you're in an abusive situation, you want to get out, but you don't have to stay and fight with someone who's abusing you, like by making him wrong. You just have to get out. And obviously, that's a complicated situation, which we're not dealing with in this video. But accepting the moment means that you're opening your heart to what is and saying, I accept everything about the moment, including my desire to change it. Right. And then it's like, oh, he's trying to fix it. Okay. Like that's what men do. There's nothing wrong with that. I just have to say, if I'm opening my heart and coming from a place of acceptance, what that means is that inside myself, I'm saying, oh, okay, he's trying to fix it. That's not what I wanted. What did I want? I wanted him to just listen. And so in that moment, you can be like, oh, you know, thank you for trying to fix it. I love that you want to solve my problem, you know, and that's actually not what I want right now. I just want you to listen. Like, are you willing to do that? You know, so you're like receiving him, you're receiving the positive intention behind what he's doing, but then you're asking for something different. And so you're not making him wrong. It's kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with improv, but you know, the first rule in improv is yes and.
I was
Don't
just gonna
say no.
ask you, like, I noticed that you cut off the butt. I like,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's very subtle. It's like sometimes I still say but, you know, I don't think it's like wrong. But you do notice something shifting when you say and instead of but. Because but kind of means like, well, I love you, but
Mhm.
like it sort of negates everything you said before that.
Yes,
So if
exactly.
you're like, I love you and, you know, it doesn't negate what you've just said.
Yeah, and I agree, and a really deep level as well. When a man like senses, knows, recognizes, sees that you accept him for who he is, and that creates even more intimacy rather than
Totally.
trying to find all the things that you see wrong with the way that he's showing up. And when I say that, I mean, like his masculinity. I don't understand why I'm taking this conversation this way, but it's like, it's what's dropping on my lap.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's this negative propaganda around men masculinity nowadays,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Well, and especially like that there is toxic masculinity, which is men, you know, that's what the whole Me Too movement is about, is it men not feeling what is consensual
Right.
between them and another person. And I think that that's what people are attacking. But I think in that, a lot of men are scared to then be masculine and then, you know, go for what they want. And like all that women want when men are going for what they want is for him to feel into what's consensual, you know, like feel into like, and we don't even always want him to ask for consent, although like I think that's what a lot of men have to do to get it because they're not in touch with their intuition. So yes, by default, ask for consent, you know, to make sure you have it. That's very important. But at the same time, it's like if he's really feeling into whether or not you're a yes and you are a yes, You know, like with your body language, with your tone of voice, and with your words, of course. I mean, I do think getting verbal consent is important in many, many circumstances. And no is a complete sentence,
right.
you know, regardless. But at the same time, it's like we're making masculinity, I think a lot of men are interpreting that as like, it's not okay to then come onto a woman or seduce a woman or go after, you know, the kind of passionate embrace that, you know, both people want. And I think that we have to understand that the masculine energy in all of us wants to go after things and wants to solve the problem, you know, wants to get to the end goal. And if we're making that wrong, obviously, like I said, if like we're, you know, because it's a controversial topic, like boundaries, consent, I think, of course, that's extremely important. And if you're in a situation where someone's violating your boundaries, say no, defend yourself, you know, that's like, I don't want to gloss over that. But at the same time, if you're with an intimate partner and what you're wanting is to create more intimacy, and he's going too fast and he's trying to solve the problem and he's trying to, you know, get to the end goal quicker than you want, like the way to create intimacy is not to say, you know, stop it, you're wrong, and close your heart. You know, the way to, I mean, it is if it's not someone you want to get closer to, but if it is someone that you want to get closer to, then the way to create deeper intimacy is to like accept the positive intention of the masculine. Like that is the masculine's desire, is to kind of seduce us, you know, not just physically, but, you know, emotionally, into this connection that they're looking for, or into this end goal that they're looking for, whatever it is. And if we acknowledge that, if we're like, wow, I love your passion, you know, and let's slow down. You know, you're not going, no, you're saying yes, and then that automatically, like when men feel our acceptance of their masculinity, that is a huge emotional turn on, because men are so used to being rejected and they're so used to being told they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree. When I first was mentioning this, is because we were talking about like the number one way to create intimacy with a man. And I know that one of the fastest ways is to be able to celebrate men and celebrate masculine energy. Because when you're in an intimate relationship, you don't necessarily want to, you know, be the feminine and the masculine at the same time. Like it's the embodiment of the dance, right? And
exactly,
when most women that I attract want to attract a really masculine man. So one of the first points to really work on is to accept the masculinity, and not only accept it, but celebrate it, want it, you know, like crave it, desire it. That's the first step. That in many ways can create like emotional and even like in an intimate sexual way, like that kind of attraction, simply because you love it.
definitely.
Right? So I believe that working on that, if there's any sort of resistance there, or if the woman feels like she still needs to be like a little bit masculine and she's not accepting his masculinity, to work on that, because that can sometimes like create a clash.
Totally.
Or like rejection inside of like the connection. Even though she's trying to connect, she's communicating in a masculine way, and it's her own fear of intimacy.
Exactly. Yeah. And do we want to talk about the subtle differences between communicating in a masculine way and a feminine way? Because I think that's something that a lot of people are confused about.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah, because I think that is the next step. Like once you've really accepted and embraced masculinity, and there are a lot of blocks that I see women have around that. So I agree that that's the first step, is really being comfortable being in your feminine. And I think that a big part of that is being comfortable with letting him lead. You know, like both with the dynamic and with the like not necessarily the like he doesn't have to lead the conversation, but in terms of like, if you want to delegate the masculine energy to him, then he's the one who's going to be thinking, planning, and doing and making decisions, you know, which isn't to say that you can't influence. You know, I love that quote from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, that the man is the head, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn the head any way she wants to.
Got it.
So if you're like empowering him, like, yes, I would love it if you pick the restaurant, or I would love it if you pick me up.
Yeah. Source of inspiration. I feel like we're the source of inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. Like we have the desire, and then he like puts the structure around making that happen, which is, I think, what we want. But then like, if that's what you want, then you have to be able to be comfortable in that following role. And I think a lot of women are scared of giving up control, and they think following means being submissive.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm leading into feminine communication, but I want to highlight the entire dynamic of, you know, what it means to be the follower, because that includes both the whole dynamic and communication. And I really want to dispel those myths, you know, because I get that a lot. I don't know if you do that, like, oh, doesn't that mean I'm being submissive?
Yeah, I think it's a bigger topic, simply because here's the thing. I personally believe that any woman who goes into coaching, she's seeking out a coach, she's working with somebody professionally to attract like the greatest love of her life and the greatest story. You're just not looking for somebody who doesn't have kind of like the same desire for greatness, you know, like an embodiment. So totally. when you go into that space of learning how to be in your feminine and be receptive, it's a deep place of trust, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you obviously want to attract the man that you can trust.
Of course.
And it's
important,
and there's ways
to
intention.
test him to see if he's trustworthy, of course.
Exactly. So it's not just with anyone, but like if you are willing and it's like the right environment for it, and that's it. But I think like regardless of the man or not, your intention to be feminine, like should be like, well, needs to be not just about the man. It's about like what feels good to you and what it represents to you. So that way, when you are in that alignment, the universe can bring you the right partner.
Yeah, I love how you said that. It's really taking your focus off the man and putting it onto being in touch with your feelings and your desires and what feels good to you in the moment. And then when something feels off, speaking it, but not like if you're in your feminine, like feminine communication is saying your desires and saying your feelings, but it's not saying, here's what we're going to do. And I'm going to choose the direction and I'm going to choose the restaurant. And like, I want you to pick me up at 8:00 and, you know, I want us to see this movie at this time. You know, it's saying like, here's what feels good to me. Or if it doesn't feel good to you, saying that doesn't feel good to me. Like, let me feel into why it doesn't feel good to me. Like, actually, I don't like seeing a movie at that time because that's a little too early. I would prefer to have dinner first. What do you think? You know, so it's like really sharing your feelings and your preferences and your desires. It's not just being submissive. And I think that that's, you know, the main misconception that women have. Like, it's sharing her feelings, it's sharing her desires, but it's letting him actually make the decision about how to go about logistically organizing it. And then if he's not doing a good job, say like, you know, of organizing it, say like, hey, you know, like what really feels good to me is if you take care of the details. Like, what do you think about that? Is that something you want to do? I mean, because if like it's not, then, you know, maybe he's having maybe he is a masculine man, but he's having an off day. You know, I think like it goes back to the first thing we talked about of accepting him. But then, you know, if it's a pattern for him where like he's the one that wants you to make the plans and you to make the decisions, then he's probably not a very masculine man. And then, you know, if you're just dating, is that who you want to be with?
Right. Or just having the conversation and seeing what's going on. Look, I remember going on a date once years ago. Oh my goodness. And it's funny because that day I was like doing like 30 different things. And I knew something was off, that I shouldn't have gone to the date right after I ended working. But I went.
Yeah.
And I was still in this space of like, what do I need to do? What I need to do? Like, let me organize. Like, I was just in that space because I didn't have a
Right.
lot of support back then. And I got to the day, like, he wasn't offering to like help or anything, but it was just off because I could sense that he was like really like gentle, like a gentleman. And I
Yeah,
was like, what's going on? But I didn't realize that it was my energy. And
exactly.
there's the polarity, right?
Yeah,
Even
yeah,
though
yeah.
like I had dressed up and no, no.
You were still in that like do mode. So there wasn't any
Yeah.
space for him to show up and take over that energy.
I remember there was a moment where like he had to find us chairs, and I was thinking like, oh, but like he can totally take that chair and that chair. And then I saw him that he was still thinking, and I just remained there waiting. And that's when it dawned on me. I'm like, oh, I'm trying to plan, like not competitively, but like I was so much in that space, I was not letting him um, think. And you know,
Yeah.
one thing that I want to really celebrate men for is that like their way of thinking is completely different, and they like tend to be more focused. Like
Yeah,
I was not thinking about all of the elements that he was thinking. So when I saw the chairs
exactly.
that he chose, I was like, oh, he was taking so many different things into consideration.
Yes.
And I had to learn how to like lean back. And it wasn't until I had some wine and I just relaxed. Then out of nowhere, he's just like, well, would you like for me to take you like out to eat right now? And I have this place and I have the other thing. And I'm like, wow, like that was like a very obvious, like it all shifted the moment that I relaxed and I decided to trust him and the experience that he was creating for me.
That is such a great example of how you were in your masculine energy. The image that came to me actually is that you were backseat driving.
Right. Right.
You weren't in the driver's seat, but you're kind of like, whoa, isn't he going to choose that one? Like you're trying to anticipate what he was going to do.
Yes, yes.
And
So,
then like he couldn't show up in the masculine role when you were doing that. And as soon as you like got into your body and just like relaxed, like then he could take over. Then you weren't backseat driving anymore. Then he actually had the presence of mind to start driving the car.
right. And you know, I think that one of the main elements of creating intimacy with men is, you know, communicating your feelings in a really confident way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Feelings go a long way. When we communicate from a place of feeling and desire, it really speaks to a man's heart, right? Because then we're evoking something in him, and like an opening, because he wants to please, he wants to serve, like he wants to create part of that, like that vision that we create or that we like envision when we are feeling into our body what would feel really good to us.
Exactly. I also want to share the misconception that a lot of women take from that, because what I experience, like a lot of my clients will say, I am sharing my feelings, but it's still pushing him away. And there's a big difference between sharing your feelings with your heart open and sharing your feelings with your heart closed. You know, so like a lot of women will hear, you know, this saying that, oh, it's good to speak your feelings, and they'll talk about, well, when you didn't call me, I was disappointed and I felt lonely, and you know, or they'll share their feelings in a way that's making him wrong, even though they're not trying to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's really important to make that distinction between, how do you know if your heart is open or if your heart is closed when you're sharing your feelings.
Right.
And I really like to like actually guide women through a practice. I mean, we could do something really short now
Yes, please.
around that, but like let's take that example, because I think that's a great example. Like when you're sitting there by the phone and then he's not calling, and you know, I mean, nowadays we have cell phones, so we're not sitting there, but you know what I mean. You know, you're feeling anxious and you're feeling disappointed, and so you might think of your own example of that, whether it's a guy didn't call, or he didn't, you know, he canceled plans, or he hasn't reached out to you in a while, or if you're with a guy, if he's just like emotionally distant and you're feeling lonely and you're feeling a lack. you know? And so like what I actually ask women to do in that moment is, first of all, kind of like literally picture your heart opening. So like whatever it is that you picture when you picture your heart, first of all, take really deep breaths into your heart. And as you keep breathing, just literally imagine like your heart unzipping or your heart opening, and really feel that feeling in your body of the disappointment or the, you know, impatience or the loneliness. Like, what does that feel like to open your heart to the feeling? I noticed as soon as I open my heart to a feeling that I feel like I still might feel the feeling. Like, for example, anxiety feels like a tightness in my stomach, or loneliness feels like kind of like an ache in my heart. But when I imagine opening my heart to it, it feels a little softer.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a little bit of space for it. And I can just kind of turn towards that part of myself with compassion. Another key component to being in your heart is self-compassion. And that's really willing to be there for your feelings and say something to the feeling like, it's okay to feel that way. You know, you can have the whole fullness of your expression. And just notice the way the sensations are happening in your body as you do that. As you say, it's okay to feel that way. I'm here for you. Like, and if it's loneliness or impatience, it's like, I'm here for you. So you don't have to be so lonely. Obviously, you want to be with other people too, but there's space in the moment for you to be here with yourself and have intimacy with yourself. Because what that means is that there's you, which is all of you, with all of your adult capabilities and strengths. And then there's this feeling, which is just a part of you. So if you're like, I'm going to be here with this feeling and I'm just going to give myself what I need right now, you know, and like fill up my life with whatever it is else that makes me happy, because it's not the guy's job to make you feel good. Like, it's your job to make you feel good. But then from that space, like then asking yourself, what is it that I really want? Like, if he called me, what would that give me? What would that provide for me? Like, would it provide me of a sense of connection with him? Would it provide me with a sense of intimacy? Would I feel like we're partners? Would I feel like we're on the same team? Would I just like be having more fun? You know, would I feel like seen and understood and met? But whatever it is, really like visualize yourself having that. And I think a great way to do that is to remember the last time, because if it's with a guy you're talking to, then he did it in the past. You know, he called you in the past. Like, how did you feel the last time he called you? Like, was it like butterflies in your stomach? Was it this feeling of like connection and care? Was it this feeling of like excitement? Whatever it is, just fill yourself up with the feeling of having that need met. Like, I think that's really important, to be coming from this fullness of having the need met, so that when he does call, you can be like, wow, you know, like, it feels so good to hear your voice. I feel so happy, because you're already filling yourself up with what it feels like to have that need met. Or if he hasn't, like, you know, if you're with a guy and like he's not paying attention to you, let's say, and he's busy. I mean, I think it's important to recognize that men have single focus, so you can't just interrupt him. But like when you are, you know, sitting at the dinner table or watching TV together, well, actually, that's still interrupting him because he's putting his attention on the TV. But whatever it is that you see each other, you can say, like, I want to say something to you. Is this a good time? Like, and he'll say, you know, whether he's in the middle of something or not. But if he has your attention, you'd be like, you know, remember the last time that we like made time for just the two of us, and it was just so magical because we weren't thinking about X, Y, and Z that we're like rushing around doing now. Like, we were just connecting. That was so wonderful, and I missed that, and I want to have that again. Like, what would allow us to make time for that? You know, so you're not like approaching him from the lack and saying like, you don't make time for me anymore, and I feel, you're even like saying like, I feel sad, or I feel angry, or I feel lonely that you're not making time for me anymore. Like, that's still coming from lack.
Right. It
And
is.
not like it's bad to say those feelings if your guy is really emotionally present. I'm not trying to say that you can't share your feelings of, loneliness or anxiety or, sadness or whatever. But in general, men, what creates intimacy is sharing our positive feelings of what we want.
Mm-hmm. It's powerful. And I believe that it's important that if you're going to communicate any other sort of feeling, like it's important to take responsibility for what you're feeling.
Yes,
without
exactly.
blaming. Because I feel like that can be a very fine line. It can be. Like when you do this, like it's your fault kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
It is a fine line. And a lot of guys will interpret it as it's their fault, even if we are taking ownership. So like, I think it's really important to like, if you're going to say, I feel lonely or I feel anxious or I feel sad or whatever, to say something like, if you want to create intimacy in those moments, to say like, it would really help me if you listened to me right now. And I want to share something, and it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with you. I just want to share what's going on with me. And then like, are you willing to listen? And if he's like, yeah, then you can share like, I feel anxious or I feel lonely or I feel sad, and here's what I want that I'm not getting, or that here's what I want that's not happening. Like, what do you think about that? What do you think we should do?
yeah.
Then you're not like making him wrong. But I think, one of the things I teach about is this concept that I call the pillars. And my partner actually is the one who taught me this, and he's actually taught me a lot of what I teach. Like, he's just like, here's how men think, and it winds up being really true. So like, you can think of like a relationship, like a house held up by pillars, and the pillars represent the positive feelings that you share between you. And if the pillars are strong, then there's room to bring in like sharing your, quote unquote, unpleasant feelings. So like, that you feel anxious or sad or ashamed or lonely or whatever. And the house won't fall down under the weight because those feelings are heavy. But if the pillars of positive connection aren't strong, if you already feel disconnected and you haven't had positive emotional experiences with him lately, and then you share more of the heavy emotions, then the house might fall down on top of the weight of the heaviness.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's important. Like, there's nothing wrong with sharing unpleasant feelings. It's just like, what context are you sharing them in?
And are you taking responsibility in what you're sharing and how you are feeling? Because sometimes, and this is important to know, because as feminine beings, we might forget, but what you're feeling might not necessarily be, it's what you're feeling. Like maybe one thing that he's doing is making you making you remember something from your childhood.
Right.
And it's important to create those moments where you get to connect with your feelings first, so that you could be like, oh, that reminds me of this. And and not immediately attach it to what you think that like it might mean, because for him, it might not mean that he's like not loving you properly. Does that make sense? So not
exactly
him. It's just like, this is what I'm feeling, and this reminds me of this, and I know that, it's part of like what I've lived in my life, and it just came up for me, and I wanted to share it with you, and I would so love if we could do this, or what do you think about that? How can you support me with that, rather than saying like, you're doing this and this makes me this, because then that makes you bad. Like, you've got to be willing to recognize when it's something that's coming up from your past, and not and assume, in a sense, whenever you're communicating with a man, your feelings, because it's what will bring intimacy, and also just being really open to him. For sure. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I've personally loved connecting with you and talking about this. We should totally do more conversation about this, because I believe it would add a lot of value to the ladies in the audience. Would you like to share with us like one last message that would make a big difference for the ladies?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I love what you just said about, and I think we've we've shared this in the beginning about like accepting masculinity, but I want to talk about like the positive intention, like that everyone is doing what they're doing because they're trying to meet a need or they're trying to get a desire met. And so if instead, like, I love what you said about taking responsibility. And like that, what that means is that, you know, you're not making him wrong. You're saying like, oh, something happened and it brought up something from my past, and I just want to share it with you to have more openness, you know, like that's amazing when we can do that. And like, I think coupled with that is, to always look at like whatever he's doing, there's a positive intention. Even if he's doing something that seems hurtful, like he might be doing that because he feels hurt. And, you know, it's important to create a boundary. Like, I won't be around this hurtful behavior, you know, but at the same time, like to recognize he's not a bad person. I mean, yes, I think there are like psychopaths and sociopaths, narcissists out there, but assuming he's not one of them, like he's trying to get a need met by his behavior. What is that? Like, to be curious about the positive intention. Because I think that's one thing that everyone, but especially men, crave the most, is to be seen that they're a good person, to be seen that they're not trying to hurt you, you know, to be seen that like they were trying, like, because otherwise they feel misunderstood. And that is the opposite of intimacy. You know, intimacy involves understanding. So if you could be curious about the positive intention behind why he did what he did, and even say that when you share your feelings, like, hey, I know that you were saying this thing, like, I mean, I do this with my partner all the time, and when I don't do it, it causes like a fight, and when I do it, it opens up more intimacy. Like, let's say he says something to me that he is trying to get me to do something that I don't want to do, you know? So it's like, if I say like, you're controlling me, or even like, I feel controlled or whatever, then he'll get defensive, and I wasn't trying to control you or whatever. But if I'm like, oh, I know that the reason you shared that is because you want us to be efficient in getting this thing done, you know, like, thanks for doing that. And like the way you said it, like, brought up my dad stuff, and I feel controlled because of my dad stuff, you know? And so like, what would make me feel better is if you invited me to do that. If you're like, hey, how do you feel about doing this? And like, then I'll probably say yes, but I might not. I might make another suggestion instead. But it's like, I'm sharing my feelings, but the first thing I did was say, like, I understand the positive reason why you did that.
Yeah.
You know, and here's how I feel. So then he won't be made wrong. Then he won't feel made wrong. So I think that's a really important component. And on my website, I do have a free ebook that talks all about how to share your feelings in a way that inspires men to deeper intimacy. So
That's amazing.
I'm happy to share the link to that if you want me to.
Please do.
Yes. And I just want to inspire women that they can have as deep a connection as they want, you know, with themselves and with a man, as long as they're willing to get beyond their own defenses and like really, you know, open their heart to themselves and to other people that they trust. I mean, a lot of times when a man is triggering us, it's hard to open our heart to him in the moment. Like, sometimes we have to like go off by ourselves and like meditate and journal and like be vulnerable with ourselves first before we can reveal it to the man. But like, whatever it takes to get past our own defenses, that's where the intimacy is.
That's beautiful. That should totally be the next video.
Okay, I love it.
Because I love it. Defense mechanisms are a thing, and it's important to know how to process them and heal them so that they don't like show up in a way that can, you know, potentially harm your relationship.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being here, and I sincerely hope that everybody enjoys your gift and enjoys this interview. And we would love to know your comments. What are you currently going through? Let us know, because we would love to support you.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I'm happy to like interact with people in the comments too. So I really wish everybody a beautiful, you know, rest of your day filled with intimacy and depth and enjoyment.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much.